Star Wars Now. The Bohm-Aharonov effect, scalar interferometry, and Soviet weaponization. T. E. Bearden. April 24, 1984. Acknowledgement. I wish to thank Drs. Harold Ferretto and Jack Dea for invaluable assistance, and basic information on building a precision scalar wave detector. In addition, I am most grateful to Mr. Hal Crawford for his marvelous special drawings and his kind permission to include them. And I owe a very special debt to Mr. John Bedini for his fundamental laboratory and bench work and his willingness to share his results and insights with me. Also, I wish to express my deepest appreciation to Mr. Josh Reynolds, SENTIA Research, and the Association of Distinguished American Scientists for financial support on this project. Without the invaluable assistance of these persons, this effort would not have been possible. Tom Bearden. April 23, 1984. Abstract. The Bohm-Aharonov effect shows that, even in the absence of electrical and magnetic fields, the potentials cause real effects to occur in the field-free regions. Using this principle, beams of pure potential without vector force fields, without electric and magnetic fields, may be deliberately produced and intersected at a distance to cause effects in the interference zone, in contradiction to classical mechanics. These effects are in fact required by quantum mechanics. Essentially, energy may be produced directly at the distant interference site or extracted from it, without energy transmission through space. Implications for weapons built on these concepts are given, and several types of such scalar electromagnetics weapons are discussed. The use of the cold explosion is detailed and evidence of its extensive testing is given. The basic mechanism for Soviet weather control over North America is briefly presented and a more extensive references given. Evidence of massive Soviet weaponization of these effects for nearly 3 decades and of Soviet scalar electromagnetics weapons testing on a global scale exists in the open literature. Selecting examples and related information are given in the appendix. Star Wars Now. The Bohm-Aharonov effect, scalar interferometry, and Soviet weaponization. 1984. T. E. Bearden. The Bohm-Aharonov effect. Originally electrical and magnetics experiments and ideas developed primarily in terms of statistics, and great difficulty was experienced in combining the two and passing to a more dynamic theoretical representation. With the advent of Maxwell's equations, electricity and magnetism were combined into an elegant electromagnetic theory, and these equations then served as the basis for the development of modern theory. Gradually potentials were relegated to a position of inferior importance, and they even came to be regarded as purely mathematical conveniences by most scientists. However, with the advent of Aharonov and Bohm's seminal paper, it became crystal clear that potentials are in fact real entities, and they can directly affect and control charged particle systems even in a region where all the fields and hence the forces on the particles have vanished. While this, of course, is completely counter to the conclusions of classical mechanics, it follows inescapably from quantum mechanics. With Chambers' direct experimental proof of the predicted Bohm-Aharonov effects in 1960, this new viewpoint was firmly established for quantum mechanics and quantum electromagnetics in general. Indeed, the Bohm-Aharonov effect even affects gauge theories, requiring the concept of non-integrable phase factors and global formulation of gauge fields. Thus increasingly it is the potentials that are primary physical entities, and the fields are of secondary, derived importance in modern quantum electrodynamics. Yet the full weapon implications of the Bohm-Aharonov discovery have not yet penetrated the minds and consciousness of Western physicists, electrical engineers, and weapons analysts. Indeed, an extended treatment of such implications has not even been addressed in the literature. This may be somewhat understandable, since it requires over 30 years for physicists to realize the primary actuality of the potentials in the first place. Nobelist Feynman states it succinctly, "It is interesting that something like this can be around for 30 years but, because of certain prejudices of what is and is not significant, continues to be ignored." Slowly, however, the overwhelming importance of the scalar electromagnetics indicated by Bohm and Aharonov has been noted by this analyst, and work to investigate and apply this rich new region of quantum electrodynamics is now most certainly warranted. Indeed, it is imperative that an effort of the highest priority be mounted immediately, for our very survival is gravely threatened by scalar electromagnetics weapons already in the hands of the Soviet Union. And at this moment, we have absolutely no defense whatsoever against them. Scalar electromagnetics. We first define scalar electromagnetics as the quantum mechanical effects and influences that can be accomplished by electrical and magnetic scalar potentials, even in the absence of electric and magnetic fields, or, in other words, that can occur even in otherwise zero electric and zero magnetic force field regions. Note that this definition includes as subsets both the ordinary classical electromagnetic field approach and the more fundamental approach of quantum electrodynamics. In the latter approach, one replaces the fields E and B in modern theory with the electrostatic scalar potential and magnetic vector potential, with the view that these potentials create the electric and magnetic fields in the first place. The Bohm-Aharonov effect shows that the electric and magnetic fields can remain zero, and yet the potentials can still cause physical effects. Thus scalar electromagnetics encompasses two cases: the normal case, in which the potentials are viewed as first creating the fields E and B, and these force fields in turn produce physical effects on charged particle systems, and the case in which fields E and B are zero, yet potentials still exist and produce physical effects on charged particle systems. Indeed, we assume total primacy of scalar potentials, after the work of Whittaker, holding that all the effects of present electrodynamics can be produced by utilization and interference of two or more scalar potentials. Note particularly that one may deliberately create the zero field, pure potential condition by opposing magnetic and/or electrical fields so that they sum to zero. That is, the zero fields can be resultant vector zeros, where the combining vector components still exist. In this case, one creates a deliberate, artificial scalar potential, which contains all the energies of the separate info-LD'd, Bohm's term, vector fields used to make the resultant vector zero. All this info-LD'd energy has been transformed to stress of spacetime, or pure potential. However, it does not have a randomized substructure as is usual in quantum electrodynamics, but has a determined, known substructure consisting of the constructed info-LD'd electric and magnetic field vectors. Conceptually, a magnetic pole is such a spatiotemporal stress potential, but usually with a randomized substructure, as is an electrical charge. Now it is fundamental that only the envelope is observable, and the info-LD'd substructure has become virtual. But by having a deliberately designed and controlled substructure, one has turned quantum mechanics inside out. One can now control and engineer the probabilities themselves, and even determine which eigenvector state of a propagating Schrödinger wave will be produced in the collapse of the wave function. Indeed, in theory one can control when the wave function collapses, and under what circumstances. Einstein was correct after all. Once we discover his more subtle control mechanism, God does not actually play dice with the universe. I strongly point out that this is a fundamental change to present quantum mechanics itself. In the axioms of quantum mechanics, the basic virtual state background activity of the universe is assumed to be totally statistical. If it can be made deterministic, then one should be able to engineer the presently probabilistic quantum interaction as desired. In short, one would have directly implemented David Bohm's hidden variables in a controlled, non-statistical manner. Awesome implications follow from such capability. Literally one can directly engineer the present quantum mechanical structure of physical reality itself, since one can engineer, affect, and control the fundamental virtual processes of nature. A potential is a point function, and it can be used to penetrate to any degree of fineness desired. Simply by making and utilizing artificial potentials with deliberate substructures, one can engineer the virtual particle interactions that produce all the physical forces of nature, bind the nucleus together, and control and create the world of macroscopic changes we think we inhabit. Conceptually, A magnetic pole is such a spatiotemporal stress potential, but usually with a randomized substructure, as is an electrical charge. Note also that, if one rhythmically varies all the individual summation vectors in the substructure by the same factor, one produces pure potential stress waves, scalar waves, without ever creating external electric and magnetic fields. These are pure waves of spacetime, and they are oscillating curvatures of spacetime itself. They are pure waves of compression and rarefaction of the massless charge of spacetime, and are properly represented as longitudinal waves rather than transverse waves. Thus they are non-Hertzian in nature. Among other things, they may be used to generate mass and inertial field directly, but that is beyond the scope of this paper. Wireless transmission of energy at a distance. To illustrate one remarkable though typical implication of this new breakthrough area, we point out that, by changing the potentials while keeping the force fields zero, one can directly produce energy at a distance as if it were transported through space without losses, even though no energy transmission through space in the normal fashion occurs as such. Indeed, it may even be possible to utilize pure potential waves to transport the energy at any velocity, not limited by the speed of light, since in some cases a potential, for example, electrostatic scalar potential, can be regarded as having infinite velocity, simply appearing everywhere at once. Electrostatic scalar potential, for example, may be regarded as a sort of locked-in stress energy of vacuum, as can any other vacuum potential. Changing the potential in a region or at a point changes the amount of locked-in or info-LD'd vacuum energy available or stored in that region or at that point. Yet simply changing the potential at that point or in that region need not involve any local expenditure of work there. The work may be expended elsewhere, and the results realized directly at a distant region by a change in that region's potential, according to the Bohm-Aharonov effect. In the remote region, charged particles are embedded in vacuum potential by their virtual particle charge flux, and in the induced potential gradients, the embedded particles move, producing electrical and magnetic forces and fields and performing work. This is somewhat analogous to putting energy in here and extracting it out there without any travel or losses in between, Nikola Tesla's old wireless transmission of energy at a distance without losses idea. Note that, quantum mechanically, we may take the view that this is a very special class of macroscopic energy tunneling phenomena, as illustrated in Aharonov and Bohm's original paper. Essentially, energy is put into the system at the locations where the scalar potentials are produced, and is recovered at the distant interference zone where particle effects are produced. To pursue this single example and further show its implications, we point out that in theory one may deliberately make a beam containing zero electric and magnetic fields, simply by properly phase locking together two or more beams of oscillating ordinary electromagnetic electrical energy, all at the same frequency. In the perfect hypothetical case, for example, two single-frequency beams phase-locked together 180 degrees apart would create such a zero-field or scalar wave beam. In the real world, one would be phase-locking two beams containing narrow bandwidths, and how much zero-field beam is obtained at the center of the bandwidth would depend on the quality sharpness of each beam. To purify the beam, it could first be transmitted through a grounded Faraday shield, which would remove most of the orthodox electromagnetic field components not properly zeroed. By successive Faraday stripping of the beam, a scalar beam as pure as desired can be obtained. Hal Crawford's artistic concept of a large scalar interferometer weapon is shown in Figure 3. Some characteristics of a scalar wave beam. Such a beam is totally undetectable by a normal electromagnetic detector, since it does not produce normal force field-induced accelerations of particles, such as the free electron gas in an antenna or the conduction electrons in a Faraday shield. Thus this wave is usually non-detectable except by unique detectors specifically designed to detect electrostatic scalar potential and magnetic potential in the condition of zero electric field and zero magnetic field. This scalar beam also is capable of strong penetration of ocean water, since free ions do not absorb nearly so much of it as for an ordinary electromagnetic field beam. Thus one may speak of megahertz and even gigahertz beams and signals transmitted through the ocean, and through the Earth. In fact, an associate of the author appears to have developed a prototype underwater transmission system, including a sensitive scalar wave detector. Even an underwater radar appears quite feasible. A sensitive scalar wave detector. Very briefly, we present a method of making a very sensitive scalar wave detector so that direct measurement and quantization can be established. First, we regard one oscillation, one wavelength, of the scalar potential wave as a longitudinal photon. Note that this photon contains a substructure, which may be deliberately determined, when artificially made, or randomized when naturally made in the idealized case. For convenience, we represent normal linearized vacuum spacetime as a horizontal or longitudinal vector, implying the direction of motion of the wave in the laboratory frame. By horizontal position in our diagram, we imply a linear, uncurved spacetime and a non-rotated frame. We represent the longitudinal scalar wave as a horizontal vector, and the usual Hertzian wave as a vertical or transverse vector. We visualize a normal detector as detecting only a vertical or transverse vector, as we have illustrated in Figure 4. As can be seen, in a linear, unrotated or uncurved spacetime, a pure scalar wave has no vertical component projected upon the laboratory frame vector, so it is not detectable by normal detectors. To detect the scalar wave, of course we could bend it so that it has a projected vertical component in the laboratory frame. However, this would be an impure wave, not a pure scalar wave, and that is not what we wish. A better way is to bend or curve spacetime itself in a small region, so that a longitudinal wave that passes through that region now possesses a vertical component with respect to that region. Thus a normal detector there will detect that vertical component. We conduct the detection current out of the bent spacetime region to an outside normal detector, and we then have a scalar wave detector. To illustrate, we show conceptually how this has been successfully done. Figure 7 shows the concept. First, we utilize a magnetic pole to provide the info-LD energy potential to bend or curve spacetime. To reach good sensitivity, we need a pole strength connected with a magnetic field strength of 40,000 Gauss or higher. We utilize a small superconducting magnet, which can reach field strengths of from 40,000 to 80,000 Gauss. Then, to prevent detection of superfluous normal radiation, we shield the entire magnet in a grounded Faraday cage, as shown in the figure. Hertzian waves will be grounded in this shield, while scalar waves will readily penetrate it undiminished. In other words, the Faraday cage serves as a stripper, to strip away the ordinary waves, leaving only the scalar waves to penetrate inside. An ordinary wire lies at the top of the magnetic pole, in proximity to it. The wire runs out of the Faraday cage through an insulated port to a resonant tuning circuit, which is sharply tunable over the range of frequencies we are interested in. A preamp amplifies the output of the tuner, and in turn feeds the input of an oscilloscope or other detector. With this detector we can select the frequency desired, and detect any passing scalar waves of that frequency. By other variations of amps and preamps, regenerative circuits, etc. we can obtain all the sensitivity desired, and utilize ordinary detection equipment already well known and highly developed. Scalar interferometry and weaponization. According to the Bohm-Aharonov effect, if two zero-field scalar wave beams are crossed in a distant region, real physical effects exist in that distant interference zone. In short, one may create transmitting scalar interferometers to produce energetic effects at a distance, in a specified region. For a theoretically perfect scalar interferometer, all the energy fed into the remote transmitters is exhibited in the effects experienced in the interference zone, without traveling through the space in between. This can be comprehended by realizing that energy at the transmitter sites is transformed into stress energy of vacuum, that is pure potential, and it is the potential variation that is accomplished, not transmission of energy through space. We stress that locked-in or info-LD vacuum energy in a potential and vector energy in transition are two quite different aspects of the same thing, just as energy and mass are two different aspects of one thing. In the interference zone of two intersecting scalar beams, the out-of-phase regions no longer have some zeroed substructure components, so electric and magnetic fields appear there, created by the now out-of-phase substructure superpositions. If other electric and magnetic fields are already there, these new fields superpose with them, either constructively or destructively. If they add, the existing fields are augmented and increased. If they oppose, the existing fields are diminished or negated. Thus the transmitting scalar interferometer can create or extinguish electromagnetic fields at a distance. In other words, it can produce energy in the distant target interference zone or extract energy from it. Continuous input of energy at the transmitter sites produces continuous emergence of energy at the remote interference site. A continuous wave jammer using this mode, for example, will place all its transmitted power in a small volume around the targeted radar at a distance. The drastic increase in lethality of this jammer is obvious. There is no square law loss, but only a volumetric dilution around the target itself. Indeed, this type of jamming can be applied to disable and destroy electromagnetic circuits of all types, in widely varying equipments such as tanks, aircraft, communication centers, vehicles, command posts, etc. It is also quite lethal against human beings. Of course, a ground radar can be utilized in a scalar interferometer mode and fire back at the aerial attacker, as shown in Figure 9. If a highly energetic scalar pulse is synchronously transmitted by each of two remote transmitters, then in the distant interference zone where the two pulses intersect, an impulsive emergence of ordinary electromagnetic energy occurs. This can produce an electromagnetic explosion at the distant intersection site, with concomitant electromagnetic pulse being radiated, etc. Even in the hard vacuum of space, such an electrical explosion and electromagnetic pulse are produced, since the electromagnetic energy produced in the interference zone is sufficient to lift Dirac electrons and other Dirac matter from the Dirac sea, producing a plasma very similar to a nuclear explosion, except for the absence of gamma radiation and nuclear residues. Evidence of Soviet weaponization of such effects is widespread in the open-source literature. Again, the lethality of the jammer transmitter is vastly expanded by such adaptation. Indeed, jammer transmitters using scalar interferometer techniques are capable of attacking most military targets, such as tanks, aircraft, vehicles, installations, fuel dumps, ammunition dumps, inflammable supplies, personnel, etc. The jammer transmitter itself becomes a totally new kind of directed energy weapon having nearly ubiquitous military application. These and other implications of scalar electromagnetics have already been pointed out by this researcher. Examples of testing of scalar electromagnetics weapons are given in Appendix 1. If continuous energy is fed into transmitters of the scalar interferometer, then continuous energy emerges in the distant interference zone. For very narrow beams and substantial input energy, the distant energy density can be made quite high. Physical destruction of distant targets can be accomplished in this fashion, and the effects can be produced directly inside bunkers, buildings, tanks and armored vehicles, aircraft, nuclear-tipped missiles, ships, etc. Relativistic effects such as a change in the rate of flow of time, in the inertia of an object, and in the mass of an object can also be obtained, at least in theory. In theory, the speed of light in vacuum can also be changed, and there is already experimental evidence of this effect. Figure 9. Ground-to-air use. Modified track radar. Scalar wave beam. Targeted aircraft. Figure 8. Tactical air-to-ground usage. Airborne jammer. Radar target. Figure 1. Scalar O-wave production. Spinning charged particle will not press S. Compressive stress. Tensile stress. Stress level on space-time. Figure 2. Creating energy at a distance. Scalar transmitter number 1. Scalar transmitter number 2. Scalar wave interferometer. Vector energy zone. Energy bottle. Figure 3. Artist's concept of a large scalar interferometer transmitter. Figure 4. Linear, uncurved laboratory frame. Bent longitudinal scalar wave. Transverse projection. Figure 5. Rotating the longitudinal wave produces a transverse component. Longitudinal scalar wave. Rotated laboratory frame. Apparent transverse projection. Figure 6. Bending the laboratory space-time frame produces a transverse component. Faraday shield. Superconducting magnet. Wire. Shielded cable. Insulated plug. Resonant tuning circuit. Preamplifier. Oscilloscope. Figure 7. A sensitive scalar wave detector. Vacuum theory. Since in the modern view the vacuum is composed of massless charge, it can be regarded as a single giant electrostatic scalar potential and magnetostatic scalar potential combined, with zero electric and magnetic fields. If one were developing weaponry based on the new scalar electromagnetics, then one might expect to find an energetics theory dealing with such a vacuum and based on scalar concepts. One might even utilize a type of field theory based on a fundamental particle conceptualized as a little piece of vacuum medium. Indeed, evidence for just such a theory exists in the Soviet literature, and direct evidence of the Soviet view of the importance of such a concept was certainly provided by the Petukov-Toth affair. Extraction of distant energy, a new concept. A second highly strategic implication of scalar electromagnetics is that a scalar interferometer connection between transmitter sites and a distant interference zone can be viewed somewhat as a sort of electrical ground wire or common potential connection between the projectors and the interference site. That is, it represents a zero-field connection between them. By establishing a resonance between the distant site and the projector sites, randomized field zeroing that occurs in the natural temperature oscillations at the distant site can be utilized to extract energy from the site to the projectors. That is, one may extract electromagnetic energy from a distance target or region, as well as produce energy from a distance target or region, as well as produce energy at a distance. Again, the energy extracted is not transported through space as normal electromagnetic energy, but as pure scalar potential. The mechanism for this may easily be seen if one recognizes that, when fields zero by opposition, the vectors comprising the opposition at that point also comprise a special value of scalar potential. Since each single field vector in the opposition has energy, then the energies of the opposing vectors are locked in as spatiotemporal stress of the scalar potential at that opposition point. Thus ordinary energy has been converted to stress of space-time scalar potential. That potential, which is simply massless charge, can then directly affect a distant system and can even do it instantaneously. Thus the scalar potential can be used, by interferometry, to directly produce energy in a distant target or extract energy directly from that target. Indeed, because of this hitherto unknown effect, the present conservation of energy law is but a special case of a more fundamental stress conservation law. This more fundamental stress conservation law has already been derived by this researcher. See Table 1 for a synopsis. Conservation of N energy, an expanded energy conservation law. 1. Conservation of charge. Charge equals mass plus charge. 2. Conservation of energy. Dynamic energy plus energy equivalence of mass equals K2. Figure 10. Mushroom cloud from sea off Japan near Russian test area. 150 miles diameter. 200 miles from Tokyo south of Kuril Islands. Mushroom cloud rising from sea. 5 hours 14 minutes, April 9, 1984. Gray-white cloud appeared. Rose 60,000 feet in 2 minutes. 180 miles southeast of Hokkaido. 200 miles from Tokyo. South of Kuril Islands. Soviet missile testing scheduled about 350 miles away, at 21 hours 0 minutes April 9, 1984. Mushroom cloud from Sea of Japan. 5 Boeing 747 flew through or near the cloud. No contamination. Non-nuclear. Ocean 21,000 feet deep. Too deep for submarine volcano to cause cloud. Indicates man-made phenomenon. 77 other such plumes since 1974. In Soviet Arctic. In non-volcanic area. Non-nuclear. Plumes noted in satellite photos in Soviet Arctic, 77 since 1974. 2 aircraft flew through for analysis. Solid material. Mostly ice. A little clay. Much colder than surrounding air. No volcanic material. No radioactive material. Maybe as 2 to 3 times as many incidents. Only examined satellite imagery in winter. Only periodic satellite coverage. Hypothesize methane venting. Hypothesize Soviet cloud seeding. Massive testing of cold explosions. Direct evidence for a decade of massive Soviet testing of such energy extraction strategic systems has recently become apparent. Since 1974, very large, anomalous mushroom-shaped ice cloud formations have been repeatedly produced over the Soviet Arctic and detected by United States weather satellites. These formations arise suddenly and are very much colder than the surrounding air. They appear to be the result of firing a large scalar interferometer in an energy extraction mode. In other words, a cold explosion occurs at a distant interference site. Recently, a most dramatic example of such a cold explosion occurred near a pre-announced Soviet weapons test zone off Japan. The mushroom cloud reached 60,000 feet altitude in about 2 minutes, and had a diameter of 150 miles. Several Boeing 747s were in the area, and were later checked for radioactivity with negative results. In fact, the United States has detected at least 78 such Soviet tests since 1974, with far less than continuous satellite coverage and little more than cursory imagery examination. 2 or 3 times as many such Soviet cold explosion tests may actually have occurred. The direct implications for worldwide weather engineering by the Soviet Union is obvious. Note also that a cold explosion of over 150 miles diameter represents an interference zone of about the size of the heart of the main troop deployment in the NATO central region. A single shot of such a weapon could almost instantly freeze every NATO soldier in that area into a block of ice. Note also that the heat energy is extracted throughout the space-time of the area. Insulation or external heat sources are no defense. The heat literally is sucked out of the interior of bodies in the interference zone. Several such cold explosion shots could finish off the entire NATO central region, again, in seconds or minutes. And since the Soviets would have given NATO no nuclear provocation, it is doubtful that a United States president would launch a strategic nuclear attack against the Soviet Union in such an eventuality. Particularly if monstrous cold explosions appeared without warning in densely populated regions of the United States. In fact, one may argue that the Western military and civilian leaders would not even grasp what was being done to them, or who was doing it. Of course, the same scalar interferometer can be used in the produce energy mode, in which case it can jam or knock out almost all electronic equipment in the target zone, detonate explosive materials therein, etc. Note that a massive electrical fireball, say several megatons, over New York City would give the desirable effects of a nuclear weapon, without any of the undesirable effects. It would give the thermal radiation, the blast wave, and the electromagnetic pulse effects, but would not give the gamma radiation and nuclear fallout. So it would burn up and blow down things, kill people, and knock out electrical systems, but would not contaminate the area. This, of course, would be very important to the Soviets if they wished to salvage the Western farmland without nuclear contamination. The perfect missile shield. By utilizing three-dimensional truncated Fourier expansion techniques with multiple transmitted frequencies, the scalar interferometer beams can be made to interfere in specific geometric patterns, such as giant hemispheric shells of glowing energy, quite useful in a strategic ABM defense of large area. Such tests of such giant ABM shields have actually been observed by competent witnesses. Typical examples of a variety of tests of weapons using this mode are given in Appendix 1. Massive Soviet weaponization. The Soviets have been engaged in weaponizing scalar electromagnetics for nearly 3 decades, as evidenced by Khrushchev's eerie 1960 announcement of a fantastic weapon, more terrible and perfect than rockets and missiles. In addition, such weapons may be what Brezhnev was referring to when the Soviet team at the SALT talks in 1975 introduced the strange proposal that we should also outlawing the development of new electromagnetic weapons of a most terrible nature, more frightful than the mind of man had ever imagined. Scalar electromagnetic weapons are directly applicable to nearly all phases of warfare, both tactical and strategic, and both offensive and defensive. They can be used to accomplish nearly 100% ABM defense of very large areas, and they can destroy intercontinental ballistic missiles, TBMs, cruise missiles, aircraft, ordnance, tanks, weapons carriers, personnel carriers, submarines, SLBMs, surface ships, communications equipment, fuel supplies, ammunition supplies, nuclear warheads, and personnel with ease and efficiency. They can be made large or small, indeed, one can be made as small as a large pistol, and carried in the hand. The Buck Rogers Ray pistol is now a reality. With such weapons, vast areas can be completely destroyed or neutralized within minutes, without permanent contamination. These weapons can also be used to accomplish weather and climate control on a worldwide scale, as well as to cause earthquakes, and they have already been employed in both modes by the Soviet Union. Soviet weather engineering. Essentially, in the produce energy mode, a powerful scalar interferometer can produce a large high-pressure area or hotspot at a given distant target area. In the extract energy mode, a large low-pressure area or cold spot can be produced at a given distant target area. Each of these spots can be moved by sweeping the interferometer beam so as to change the location of the distant interference zone. That is, one synchronously rotates the interferometer beam so as to gradually change the location of the distant interference zone, which is creating the spot. By using multiple transmitters and fairly broad bears, an interference grid can be created over an entire continent or substantial portions of it. In each grid block in the interference zone, energy can be produced or extracted. Direct evidence for such usage by the Soviets over North America has been presented. Certain signatures of the Soviet weather control interferometry grid system have been observed all over the United States, and one major signature has been photographed over Huntsville, Alabama by this author. It is stressed that our normal instruments do not usually detect the directly active scalar beams, unless we detect longitudinal waves as shown in Figure 16. A more definitive paper on this overt weather engineering over North America is in preparation. Conclusion. As can be seen, the new, to the west, scalar electromagnetics is a reality, as evidenced by the Bohm-Aharonov work and its direct experimental proof. The implications for weaponization on a massive strategic and tactical scale are obvious, and unfortunately the Soviet Union has already developed several generations of such weapons. At least one other country has also developed scalar electromagnetics weaponry. The Soviet scalar electromagnetics weapons development program appears to have been well underway at the time of the beginning of the microwave radiation of the United States Embassy in Moscow, about 1959 or 1960. A good description of the history of this microwave radiation has been given by Brodeur from a normal electromagnetics viewpoint. Note that twin beams were utilized in the radiation, at least from time to time, and a variety of systemological difficulties were induced in personnel in the embassy. As late as 1982, major Soviet representatives continued to announce warnings of the impending use of new Soviet weapons more powerful than nuclear arsenals. A variety of other potential incidents of overt Soviet use of scalar wave weapons against the United States has been presented by this author. Typical examples are given in Appendix 1. To repeat, evidence of massive Soviet testing of scalar electromagnetic weapons on a global scale abounds in the open literature. The Soviets have deploying and repeatedly testing these weapons for nearly 3 decades, without being recognized by the Western intelligence and scientific communities for what they were. The West is almost totally defenseless against these frightful Soviet scalar electromagnetics weapons, and an immediate Manhattan Project to develop defenses on a crash basis is urgently needed if we are to survive at all. Khrushchev's 1960 statement. We have a new weapon just within the portfolio of our scientists so powerful that, if unrestrainedly used, it could wipe out all life on Earth. Brezhnev's 1975 proposal. At the SALT talks on June 13, 1975. The Soviets urged the United States to agree on a ban of research and development of new kinds of weapons more terrible than anything the world has known. Network of virtual transmitters. Weather in spring of 1983. Virtual transmitters in the interference grid. Energy peaks, virtual transmitters. Note, maybe throughs instead of peaks. In that case, energy is extracted. Giant radial related to a virtual transmitter. Fall of 1983, Florida, Alabama. Formation of a single giant radial. Early 1984, California, Alabama, LOA, 400 miles west of Memphis. Formation of a double giant radial. The sightings over Huntsville, Alabama. Intense peak of normal energy. Pattern linkage. Central ring disappears. Boat-tailed. Detection of transverse and longitudinal waves. Transverse electromagnetic wave, transverse oscillations induced in electron gas. Longitudinal electromagnetic wave, no detection with normal detector, no transverse oscillations induced. Special detector needed. Figure 17. Twin giant radial pattern. System moving west at 20 to 30 miles per hour. Table 7. Twin giant radials. Friday, January 6, 1984, 7 to 45 minutes past 7. Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. Multiple observers. Weather clear except for this system. Extremely good visibility. System moving west 20 to 30 miles per hour. Remnants of a second twin giant radial system seen in same area 1130 to 1145. Table 8. Radiation of United States Embassy in Moscow. Since 1959 or 1960. High-level target United States Ambassador. Guarantees personal attention of President, NSA, Central Intelligence Agency, DIA, top consulting scientists, State Department, leading scientific institutions, National Security Council, etc. Reaction reveals United States knowledge of Tesla electromagnetics. 4 United States presidents requested Soviets to cease. Cut from 18 microwatts per square centimeter to 2 microwatts per square centimeter. Then again increased. Table 9. Lysenko's 1982 statement. World Futures Conference, Washington, D.C. July 20, 1982. Lysenko first name unknown. Soviet Embassy in Washington, D.C. Stated will shortly see development of new weapons. More powerful than nuclear weapons. Will be non-verifiable. Tesla weapon at Saryzhagan, scalar potential interferometer. Fourier transform sections, 12 wavelengths each. Power for pulse modules. Explosive generators bank. Nuclear flashes off the coast of Africa. Booms of United States East Coast. Flashes over Atlantic, off southwest coast of Africa, detected by Vela satellites. Many other test incidents. Slow wave, fast wave, scalar interferometer, Tesla howitzer. Giant airborne missile shield seen from Afghanistan, deep within Soviet Union, towards Saryzhagan missile test range. Note close proximity in time to first flash detected by Vela satellites. Nick Downey describes the strange lurid glow that flared silently over the Hindu Kush. The Sunday Times, London, August 17, 1930. Multiple incidents in September 1979. Tesla shield. Courtesy Hal Crawford. Yugoslavian earthquake, test of a Tesla howitzer? Yugoslavian earthquake April 15, 1979. 7.2 on Richter scale. Epicenter 33 kilometers deep. More than 100 aftershocks. At Kemenari. Adriatic Sea mushroomed up. Like atomic bomb explosion. Additional details needed. Quake in Tangshan, China. July 28, 1976. 7.8 on Richter scale. Hundreds of thousands killed. Accompanied by light, electrical effects. 3 to 5 days before. Communications interference within 250 kilometers. Sky lighting observed. Continuous fireball. Lithuania, September 10, 1976. British European Airways flight number 831 between Moscow and London. Mysterious light over North Pacific. Asahi Evening News, Tokyo, June 22, 1982, North Pacific, 700 kilometers east of Kushiro. Japan Airlines Flight 403. Japan Airlines Flight 421. Continuous Tesla electromagnetic pulse globe and giant airborne missile shield. Continuous Tesla electromagnetic pulse globe. Tehran, Iran, June 17, 1966. Seen from near Mehrabad Airport. Observed 4 to 5 minutes. Seen by 2 aircraft. Tesla airborne missile defenses. Detection and tracking. Continuous Tesla electromagnetic pulse globe DUDS electronics. Tesla Fireball continuously vaporizes vehicle. Tesla Fireball pulse. Tesla howitzer. Tesla shield. Hemisphere and globes 1977. Moderately luminous hemisphere formed. March 24, 1977. North Atlantic 8:55 to 9:02. Searchlight appeared 20 degrees above horizon. Shined down for 10 seconds. Extinguished, replaced by luminous patch 1 degree. Semicircle of moderate luminosity formed about patch 3 minutes. Another luminescent patch observed above semicircle. After total of 7 minutes, disappeared. East Coast aerial blasts, high burst registration. December 2, 10 m off South Carolina. 3:45 p.m. off Northeast Coast New Jersey and Connecticut. December 15, 8:30 to 10:30 m 5 blasts off South Carolina. December 20th. Evening 3 loud explosions, ball of fire, Connecticut. December 21, 2 a.m. loud explosions and intense globular light in sky, New Jersey, smoke detector went off seconds before. 7 p.m. explosions over Seacoast, New Jersey. December 22, 1 New Jersey. 8:15 Charleston. January 13, 2 p.m. loud booms, Charlestown, South Carolina. Booms in Delaware. November 16, 1982. 5 mysterious morning booms within 39-minute period. Rock, Sussex County. Recorded on Georgetown seismographs. No supersonic flights. 1969 Virgin Islands incident. 8:15 p.m., Thursday, August 1969, Virgin Islands, seen by many residents. Possible Tesla shield. Smooth curved edge. Faintly luminescent. Luminous arc. August 22, 1969, West Indies. Luminous area sighted. Bearing 310 degrees. Grew in size, rose in altitude. Turned into arch or crescent. Expanding dome-like phenomenon. March 20, 1969, Caribbean and Western North Atlantic. Semicircle. Milky white light. Quite bright at first. Dimmed as enlarged. Lasted 10 minutes. 2 arcs in the sky. Double concentric Tesla shields. June 1, 1961, Indian Ocean. Very bright arc. Second dimmer arc appeared. Laser blinding of United States satellites. At least 4 incidents in latter 1975. 2 United States Air Force satellites in elliptical orbit. Infrared sensors went down. 1 blinded up to 4 hours. Positioning and interference suggest operational deployment. Soviet technological breakthrough on the order of lithium fusion and Sputniks. Such a laser would require long-range infrared capability, pulses of very long duration, extraordinary point accuracy, if mobile, miniature power supply, a breakthrough of the first magnitude. United States reconnaissance satellites and photo interpreters failed to locate any laser or power supply. Extreme intensity sky brightening. Western Alaska, May 15, 1972. Weather, overcast. Entire sky suddenly brightened to full daylight intensity, like a sudden flash buell. Lasted about 2 to 7 seconds. 2 closely spaced flashes noted. Changed color blue to green to white, fading to orange or reddish. Radar invisibility. Energy captured, no reflection. Energy bottle. Interference pattern between Fourier expansion patterns. Creating an inertial field, anti-gravity. Scalar resonance phenomenon, unidirectional forces induced on all nucleons. Lightning wall. Patrol plane commander. United States Navy P-5 aircraft. Atlantic Ocean. 200 miles east of Norfolk. Approached solid wall of lining from very high altitude to near the water, north-south as far as could see. Radar scope clear. Rigged aircraft for heavy weather. Plunged directly through wall. Wall was very thin. Cloudless sky. Anomalous burns and underwater sounds. Underwater, off Cornwall. Seals and fish discovered dying, mysterious burns marks. Divers and reporters investigated, heard sounds underwater, voices in French, English, Russian, classical music, Brahms, Rachmaninoff, unnerving buzzing, thick black sludge, yellowish matter. Cloud arc. Strait of Gibraltar, July 12, 1980, a most peculiar cloud arch. Marine Observer 51. Arc of clouds in otherwise cloudless sky. Sharp pressure and temperature gradients. Needed, immediate crash program, information gathering, coalition, phenomenology, theory, experiments, engineering design, countermeasures.